But I'm
Yeah,
to
sure
you.
for her, yeah.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of like right wingers in like Boris Johnson types, UKIP types that are also pretty scary, like English nationalists.
Like,
Sorry, I don't do politics.
Oh, you don't do okay. That's
I
probably for
mean,
the best.
I just don't get involved in the main. I was always saying to people the main difference between the UK and the USA politics is that a lot of ours is according to class. So,
Mm,
if you speak English like Boris Johnson or you're part of the royal family, um, that is considered more favorable. And I would say our education system is very complex, and it's according to the class system in the UK. And so we have all types of schools. The top is sort of private boarding schools, and then day schools, private day schools, and then it would be state schools, and then it sort of goes down the line. And so we're very much a society based on class. Things have changed, have progressed. So yeah, I think because we're not a republic, it's very different here in some respects.
mm.
And we don't have that many. It's not that we're only starting to get like a huge kind of proportion Latin American. I would use that as a terminology because they term us all in the same way, like ethnic groups. So we don't really distinguish between other Latin Americans, so to speak. We're just put into one label. So that's how it is in the UK in terms of like Latin American indigenism. We don't really talk about those sorts of subjects because people haven't really got their head around like Latin America as their differences.
So, so what you're saying is that we just need more Latin Americans in Eton, and then that's how we'll and Oxford, and that's how we'll decolonize England, the UK.
Well, it's interesting because the Latin American population only increased in the late 90s and post 2000s. So most people who are now having children will be born in the UK.
Hmm.
And so we're very much behind the USA. But I'm probably one of the first Andean children to be brought up. I'm one of the first Andean people to have been brought up in the UK with that speaks English with an English accent. Me and my brother.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
is
that's
there?
only through adoption, by the way. So
Ah,
100% Andean. And so a lot of people that come to the UK pre 1990, their parents married an English or European person, so they're half Andean. But we're full Andean, and that's only because we're adopted.
okay. So is a lot of are a lot of the Latin American community like adopted, or they
No, no, no,
is it,
no, no, they're not
no, is it,
adopted.
or is there like a very
Okay.
strict immigration process that
Well,
that
what
they have to
happened
pass?
was when Spain had when the world crisis in 2008, you remember the economic crisis? There were no jobs in Spain. So a lot of people came, or Italy. So a lot of people came because they already had nationalization through Spain or Italy. So they came to England to get work and they stayed.
Oh,
So
okay.
there was a law pre 2000 that if you wanted to migrate to Spain, that it would only take 5 years to get residency. So a lot of Spanish, Peruvians, Ecuadorians went to Spain and they lived there and they got citizenship. And so these are the children and the parents are coming to Europe, to England now and becoming part of the English society.
Oh, that's such an interesting process.
Yes.
Like because you always hear the immigration process is through Mexico here, or people going through immigrating from planes from Latin America and then arriving here on like visas. But that's I think a far more interesting and complex, or maybe
Hmm.
it's not. I wouldn't say like far more interesting. I think it's like interesting because it's more novel to a lot of to a lot of people on the Western Hemisphere.
Right. So, for example, I don't want to bore you, but
No, keep going.
in 2016, so for example, I was brought up with a Peruvian passport, okay? So I was adopted by immigrants to the UK. So what that means is that I wasn't entitled to receive their nationality. So I was actually a Peruvian in London. So I had my immigration stamp. I would go to Europe with a visa. I would go to United States with a visa. So I grew up as a Peruvian citizen in London with adopted parents, which is very weird kind of situation, should we say. In 2016, Peru got their biometrical passport, which enabled all Peruvians to access Europe visa free, which is a big, big deal because never before had they were able to access to a large portion of the world, which equals economic revenue for them. So it sort of tied in with the pre-immigration policy 2000. So it's sort of like a really big arena for the Latin American community to sort of like immigrate now to Europe in different ways and forms and shapes. So what this means is that Peruvians now can go to any part of Europe visa free. This means that obviously in time, in say 15 years time, we're going to see a bigger portion of, let's say, Peruvians, for example, to the UK eventually. So that will in time sort of just work itself out. But yeah, so there's lots of changes within the immigration procedures vis-a-vis Peru. The passport now is a lot more, it's more worth more points than it was 6 years ago.
And how's the cultural situation in like I know a lot of Latin Americans reside in London.
Yes.
There's like one I forget which specific neighborhood they reside in. I think it's
So
like Latin Market.
yes, so there's two areas more or less where there's a lot of Latin American, the bigger community that's in the south part of London called Elephant and Castle, and
Mm.
then the north part of London called, oh my gosh, Highbury and Islington, something like that. I haven't never been there. Seven Sisters or something like that. And so we have our two distinguished communities. But I would say when we think about Latin Americans, the biggest, like one of the biggest groups would be Brazilians, a fair amount Argentinians, a lot of Colombians. I mean, a lot. They've been coming to the UK since the 80s, but a lot of them have married half, in the half, kind of half mother's Colombian, dad could be European or something like that, or reverse, obviously. And then there's a proportion like Ecuadorian, Bolivian, but really Peru, like, because I'm Peruvian,
Yeah.
it's it's not as big as Bolivian, it's not as big as Ecuador or Colombia.
Wow.
But yeah, I think we're about 300,000, if I'm not right, Peruvians in the UK, or maybe it's 30,000. It's something
I
like
I
that.
would think 30,000 because 300,000
30,000,
seems
yeah,
considerable.
30,000, something like that. Because I was looking, they sometimes if you check on the databases, like I often check on the databases of like not of like the voting, because we all have voting cards. So those who are registered in England, it's really like tiny, like small. I was like really shocked, like not shocked, but I was like, oh, okay, figures, yeah. So yeah.
I'm actually amazed that there's more than I would think there'd only be about like 1,000, 2,000. It seemed like Latin Americans in the UK are like of much smaller communities. So maybe they're are you sure you're not talking about like 30,000 in terms of like the entire Latin American community?
No, I think maybe I don't know. It was small. I don't know what it is exactly. Don't want to give like statistics, but it was
Yeah.
quite small. But I know in like the Latin American population in the UK, it's probably about I was reading it recently, but I can't quite remember the actual statistic. But yeah.
Yeah, let me ask a question. Unless Marcus or Juan Chaloa wanna like interject, but
I'm still analyzing. You're good.
okay. Do you mind if I ask, like, is there any interactions between maybe migrants who go to England and then others that might go to like Scotland to like Edinburgh or to Wales or even to Northern Ireland? Is there a considerable population there, or is there any type of like solidarity between like many of these other like national groups that might
They
feel
yeah,
dispossessed by like the English?
well, there's groups that each uh, there are certain groups within the UK. I think they're all based. Most of them are based in London, I think. So
Okay.
there's like a dance group. Lots of it. I feel a lot of it is orientated around dancing and festivity. So there's a Bolivian group in London. There's a there's a children's workshop for dancing for Peru. It's called Andean Expression. There's a Runasami or something like that for Quechuan speakers.
Oh,
There's a Colombian sort of like human rights kind of group. There's other groups to do to help with the migration if you need lawyers or if you need translations or if you need other kind of assistance. There's one in South London. There's different, I think there's about 10 or so groups developed according to the needs of their communities. But these are, some of them have been in existence since 1984, I think, like there's a Latin human kind of thing, but others have been formed like post 2000. But I must say that I don't really know much about these groups, as like I've heard about them, but I'm not really participating in these groups for different reasons. I always feel that, for me at least, that my first experience of certain groups was when I was in my teenage with my brother, and we would say to them, we don't speak Spanish, and they would come back to us speaking Spanish, and I say, no hablo español, and they would look at us strange and saying, why don't you speak Spanish? Because a lot of these Latin Americans obviously came to England speaking Spanish. They were migrants. So here was us, you know, not many children at that time or teenagers with native English accents saying to them, we don't speak Spanish. And they just couldn't quite understand we didn't speak. And we were told them we were adopted, but they didn't understand really what that really meant, you know? So there was a lack of, obviously, we're very few of adoptees. I'm not expecting them to understand. So when me and my brother would come and we'd want to participate and we would want to do, I just felt that they just didn't know how to engage with us and we didn't know how to engage with them. So it was a little bit like a back and forth kind of thing. And we just felt like, you know what, we just hop on the plane and go to Peru. So that was what we kind of preferred, to go to Peru. So we kind of didn't really grow up with any of that. And so it wasn't something that was part of my life in London.
wow. Do you are there any like Spanish education is there like Spanish education in like elementary school or in like grade schools as you're
Okay.
growing up?
So predominantly it used to be German and French for a very long time,
That
but
makes sense.
now in the past, let's say 7 years or so, I'm seeing more schools learn Spanish.
Hmm. And I'm assuming that it's an emphasis on Spanish from Spain and not from Latin America.
I guess so. I've not really been in their lessons. I can't really say that,
Okay.
because obviously it would depend. I know they had a program where they would some schools would be able to like apply in like a European thing where they get a French or a Spanish or a German intern. So I guess it would probably be from Spain.
Hmm. Marcus, do you think you have any similarities with the in terms of that type of adoption story?
Well, for mine, it's a little bit different. But before I add on to that, I want to say, Claude, welcome. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm loving the piano. By the way, I didn't know you played. I'm working on it too. Um, but yeah, going back to my adoption story, it's a little bit. I mean, for a lot of adoptees, especially growing up in the Midwest part, like in Illinois, really feels like we're just cut off from like a lot of culture, especially like obviously Peruvian Indian culture for those us that were adopted from Peru or Bolivia, and especially like going like going back to like exposure, like what I had mentioned to the last video, like you're not exposed to like a lot of different like types of people from different places around the world. Like where I came from was like a very not like extremely homogenous, but fairly like homogenous place. Mostly like white Americans. So I didn't really meet many Peruvians, many people from South America at all. So I really had to like dig my own little path and like to reconnect. So thankfully there's Facebook, and starting up this YouTube channel and meeting like these great people on here too. So yeah, definitely like my journey compared to Millie's is much different. Millie got to grow up in London, where I grew up in like mid small town, like USA population. Actually, not that small, like 100,000, 120,000 people, but like small compared to like where Millie came from London. You got like millions of people that live there, from all around the world. I think it's the most multicultural city in the world, if I'm not correct. That's what I read in somewhere about facts that London was the most diverse city.
I would contest that. I feel like New York City is, but
Yeah, I would say that too.
Yeah, I gotta
yeah,
agree with New Malta here. Especially me living out in Jersey. Like you go to New York, you see people from literally
But
all over the world.
That's
I will
true.
say that New York is bigger, therefore they'll be holding bigger people. So in terms of space, probably in a different way more diverse in that respect. I don't know.
maybe in terms of in European terms, it could be like the
Yeah,
most diverse.
definitely. But
I,
anyway,
Do you
back
mind
to
if I
school.
ask? Do you mind if I ask one more question? I don't know if you're trying to go now, but it's just such an interesting conversation that's so rarely had, honestly. Before, do you mind if I ask, what is the interaction between like Latin Americans, the Latin American migrant community, with other immigrant groups there, like with Pakistanis, with different East Asian folks, with a lot of Middle Eastern folks? Like, what is the relationship that's had with
In
many Indians as well?
you mean in London?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so well, okay, so a lot of the Latin America, well, I can't, it's really generic because Latin Americans can live in really distinct parts of England, like I say, Scotland, North. So I'm only going to talk about London, okay? All right? Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
that works.
okay, so the way that London is constructed is that it's really multi-diverse in terms of you'll find people living all different places in different, we call them boroughs, you maybe call them districts, I don't know what you call them, but we're really multi-diverse. But like I say, let's take the south of England, what we say, London, Elephant and Castle. Okay, in Elephant and Castle, yes, there's a huge amount of Latinos in Elephant and Castle, but only also is a huge amount of people of like native of English people, like Southern Londoners. Also close by, there's Asians as well. So it's quite diverse. So if you go to school, you might find that maybe half of the classroom is, or a quarter of is Latino, but also you will find there's some from Somalia or from Caribbeans or Londoners, like generation Londoners. So I would say in the school dynamics, it's pretty mixed. And then that will form the friendships out of the friendship. Now, there's a lot of it depending upon the level of English, because will the parents be able to communicate with the parents? Will So generally speaking, I feel that it's a really diverse environment. Children form friends with a lot of interact with lots of people from different places. It will also depend on the commonality, obviously. I think a lot of Latinos, like the first generation of Latinos, they do like to, obviously, they're getting used to the country, so they prefer to stay within their own community. But I think if they have children, they're more, and obviously when you're working in a very diverse society, so you're naturally going to have to learn about other different cultures and have to be with other people. So I think the assimilation process perhaps a lot easier because London is such a small city that it's you're bound to meet and bound to interact with a lot of different people all the time.
I feel like it's oftentimes in many Latin American communities here, and many indigenous descendant communities, there can be a type of insularity because of sometimes with like the first generation, there's a lot of language barriers. Depending and if there's a community already set up, sometimes there isn't that need for assimilation because everyone is able to speak Spanish, so daily life is able to happen, and then people find their way through, let's say, through highways, through public transport, and are able to live out a productive and actually and thrive in an environment where like English would be lacking. So, which is such an interesting contrast with like England because there is a lot more with that diversity. There's also there seems to be actually a similar level of assimilation into English
Yeah,
acquisition.
I think you have to have, there's a point where you have to assimilate because, you know, because there's not that many of us, in a sense. You have to, if you've got kids, you have to kind of assimilating already, even if you don't choose. You kind of assimilate with your child's friends, or you're assimilating because you have to go to work, and the likelihood that's going to be another Latino. I actually haven't met another Latino at work, so it doesn't really happen. I always get asked, where are you from, always, because I always think I'm Asian. So depending upon, you most people don't work within their own local communities, because our boroughs are tiny. It's not like New York or America, where it's one big, and we've got a really good transportation system. So you can actually go from one borough to the next in 2 stops. So it's literally, it's not that big.
Wow. That's super interesting, and I think especially I think with a lot of the history of Latin Americans in the U.S., there's always the emphasis on bilingualism. During the 60s and the 70s, the majority groups were Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and Cubans. So you had many of those groups fighting for their own national immigrant demands and the local conditions within their regions. Like Mexicans were in the southwest of the country, Puerto Ricans were in the northeast, and mainly in New York City. And then you had a lot of Cubans dominating in the southeast in Florida. Um, but I think, and then you had the wave of Latin American immigrants coming in from Central and South America, follow and like mainly sometimes in the 80s, but mainly in the 90s and 2000s, which is I think a similar trajectory with the UK as well. But I feel like there should be an attempt at bilingualism at the very least. If there Because I mean myself, I know English and I would have loved to have had the opportunity to learn proper Spanish or like grammatically correct Spanish and then be able to compare that with the Spanish spoken at home and as well as be able to use that when I go to Latin America to Bolivia and speak Spanish with my own family members and understand them coherently and fluently rather than try to parse it out based on what's on my sometimes my own Spanglish, which is also kind of a sad fact for a lot of folks who have to juggle 2 languages and don't do it very successfully. So I don't know. I would just recommend like that type of bilingualism is important, especially for further generations. If not to maintain the community, to at least have a connection where you can connect with other communities in Spain and in Latin America,
Mm.
that would connect someone to their home country.
I think my impression is that okay, so we had a lot of Spanish people coming to the England in the 70s. Okay,
Yeah.
so from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and so forth, they've actually established like Spain, from Spain. They actually established Spanish schools on Saturdays.
Wow.
I mean, that's since the 70s. I used to have friends who were from Portugal, from Italy, from who knows, and they used to go to school on Saturdays just to have their cultural knowledge and their language. So that has been implemented for a long time.
Wow.
So it would just literally be they'd hire a school out, literally, or a local community centre, and they would get all the children together and they would just reinforce the language. So that's another way where it's been, historically speaking, the language being, and so they have Polish schools, they have Japanese schools, they have all sorts of schools now. This has been developed from when there's a lot of Spanish people left Spain due to Franco in the 60s and 70s, and they came to England. And their children were born in the 70s, 80s, and these are the children who I would say were the first generation of Spanish from Spain, and they would grow up with their language. So what has happened is that the Latin Americans, I think, have taken on what they've seen in the school parents kind of thing, and they've just done the same. And so I think that's also been ingrained in England, to keep your own language. It's not really, no one has really taught not to do this. So language preservation, I think, is not a problem in England. Many people speak bilingual, like it's normal to speak by another language. I just think now it's just with the new community of Latin America that's a little bit different, because it's coming from Latin America. So Latin American Spanish, they might set their own, or they might go to the Spanish center that's been already established since the 70s. But whatever, I feel that the Latin American communities have a very strong cultural awareness and appreciation, and they do whatever they need to do to preserve what they need to preserve. And I also think because a lot of them already have Spanish nationality or French or Italian, their place in UK is a very different to like the places of where Latin Americans have arrived in the United States, where they have to like get their immigration status, they have to get their citizenship. Whereas a lot of Latinos in Latin Americans in the UK have already come with a secure sense of place.
Mm.
So it's very different discussion.
No, that very much is, and and thank you for clarifying, because I also, it is also presumptuous for me to also think that there's a similar educational and like economic standard between the U.S. and the U.K., especially just because European education far exceeds a lot of American standards. But also seeing how like a lot of people already arrive with a type of citizenship
Mm-hmm.
that does change the discussion a lot. A lot of the times,
Mm.
communities stay cohesive here because of that undocumented status, because of the fear of deportation, as well as um, the economic boundaries that that creates not having citizenship. So I wonder what the future is for the Latin American community there, and I'm really glad that there's there that Latin Americans are making the best out of already established Spanish schools. I honestly, that would be a heavily progressive um set of conditions for for Latinos here, for indigenous peoples here. But I think then in that case, it would be establishing an indigenous programs or being connected with people who can teach indigenous schools. You
Yeah,
did mention the Runasimi Center that was done by Peruvians, or dance group. So I think there's a foundation there already.
yeah. I think like in England, like it's only a Saturday school, but it's historically worked, you know, for people to get together to talk about their issues and to help each other. I think a biggest problem with I think Latin Americans so struggle with obviously is the language barrier because obviously they've been speaking Spanish in Spain or Italian or whatever, you know, their communities in Italy. They come into to England is a very different, especially to London, where it's very different type of cultural norms in as opposed to Spain and Italy. And I think I struggle with that, you know, with the weather and the fact, you know, and other things like this, you know, and that they're well, depending upon when you came to England, obviously, there wouldn't have been a huge Latin American presence, for example. And when I tell this to Marcus, like the first time I tasted Peruvian food was in Peru, meaning Peruvian food in London wasn't really well known until 2008, 10. So I would say even 12 if I'm pushing it. So there were Peruvian restaurants for a long time, just one until 2008. And then there was two, and then there was three, and then there's six, you know. So what I'm saying is that, you know, like we were saying with tourism, the conversation of Latin America, especially Peru, has widened up with people's awareness of Machu Picchu and Peru and the Andes, and some people are gravitating towards it in a healthy and unhealthy way. So what this means for me as a person is that more people now know where Peru is, and people now know what the Andes means. Slowly, people are understanding there's a whole new continent and a whole new world called the Andes, and people now are realizing that. But for a long time, I honestly had to take the map and show people where Peru is and the Andes. So for me, as a British Peruvian and whatever I call myself, um, I feel as though it's been very slow progression. But this is the place that I ended up in. You know, I didn't have any say. You know, I can choose on a map if I could go to Italy or France or America or Canada. It's where I happen to fall on.
Mm.
And so for me, I obviously said, you know, for me, it was very normal to want to know where I came from. So I find it really interesting the conversation of reunification, you know, finding out who you are, finding out like you're from the Andes, you're indigenous. For me, this was a question I had to ask myself from the age of 3. You know, it was a natural process. So I think it's really interesting, at least for me, like I felt that was the only way to know about who I was, to go back or, you know, to go back to the land to see where I was born, because I came from a country that really didn't have any knowledge or could not give me the answers. So I think it's an interesting conversation. Like, I'm sorry, I forgot her name.
Yes,
Kispe?
Sisa Quispe.
Yeah. And the whole knowledge that she's bringing, that, she had to go through this route, and I've often pondered upon why is it Peruvians in Peru are having to go down this route. It's people could understand for Peruvians who weren't born with, I mean, adopted, abroad, and we had to go searching for our roots, or we were living in a country that really had no representation. That seemed like obviously. But so for me, it's a whole different type of story and experience for Peruvians living in Peru, from Peru, with Peruvian blood, having to go down this route, this path of rediscovery. It's a fascinating opposite experiences when you compare the adoptee route and the Peruvian route. I think there's lots of it's fascinating for me to compare our experiences.
Hmm. And I think it just makes sense with like I mean there's similar stories here too of just of Andean peoples being at the in the back burner of the Latin of like Latinx, Latin American, indigenous community here. A lot of people I've heard stories from a lot of people, not just in like the major Andean areas, but like outside, who have said, yeah, people, whenever I said I'm from Peru or I'm from Ecuador, they'd be like, you mean Mexico? Because it's always the common joke that if you're like, that you're just from Mexico. I'm not sure if there's a similar stereotype in England, but um, no, I
Mm.
think it's kind of refreshing to hear that that struggle isn't just in the U.S. Though I would have wished it were farther along than it is. But
It's
it's just such yes.
well, it just what I'm saying. It because I'm not really in looking. I'm in my little island here, you
Yeah.
know, and I've always seen my struggle as an adoptee struggle. That's what I'm like. I always identified it as the adoptee struggle. Like, if you choose to go down this route, and now I've like obviously speaking to Marcus and realizing what this podcast is all about. I'm realizing it's the Latin American struggle or whatever you want to call it. And it's really, it's like, I'm trying to understand it fully from the perspective of you guys living in America and Peruvians living in Peru or Bolivians living in Peru and Bolivia, because I think there's like three paths. It seems to me like the adoptee path, because I call it as a set in itself, and then there's the indigenous communities born in America or France or wherever they're from, and then there's the Peruvians and Bolivians living in Bolivia, Peru, having to go through their own struggles. There's like three different paths that people having to come to work themselves out. And it's taken me, I mean, I've been going to Peru back and forth for 18 years, you know. So it's taken me a long time to fully understand my place in England and my place in Peru. And I just think it really takes a lot of time to reflect and to draw on who you are in different spaces and to read and to figure out who you want to be and which people to go to and what kind of experiences enable you to reach a place where you feel connected. Um, and and I know as an adoptee, we have lots of different layers as opposed to you guys with knowing who your birth roots are. And I'd like to know more about like your experiences in another podcast or whatever, and seeing how I can learn from you guys, like people born in the United States or Peruvians born in Peru. Like, how is it been for you guys, and like to identify the main themes and to see how we can help each other? Because I think our answers are within ourselves. It's just that we have to figure out like what's our differences and what's our similarities and how we can help each other. That's how I see it.
Oh, most definitely. I think what helps, if I'm going to pinpoint some one thing, would be that Latin America or like the United States and all of the Americas are a lot more racialized than Europe is. Though I don't want to discount that there are racial factors
Mm-hmm.
in Europe and even especially in London with many Caribbean folks. with their fear of deportation. I've heard
Mhm.
there are fears of
Yeah,
deportation after the revoking of a work visa that was implemented back in the, I believe, the 50s. Um,
50,
it-
the Windrush
yeah, the
generation.
Windrush, yeah, the where the UK was looking for Caribbean labor, I think, post World War
Yeah.
II,
Hmm.
which is a similar program here. There were similar programs like the Braceros program, where um, following World War One, the United States was looking for Mexican labor, for cheap Mexican labor, and would give in work visas. And then they were deported during the Great Depression. Many of them remained, or some came back. And then after World War II, there was another mass deportation. So I think there are similar struggles there with like being adopted, being immigrants, and there are racial structures. But I think it's a lot more um, it it's a lot more at the foundation of the historical narratives that are either told in school or learned by one's own like individual journey in education. So I think that's what I think helped a lot of us be like, yes, we're indigenous, despite our identities being already racialized as Latino. We're like, a lot of these racial dynamics are already have questionable past in and of themselves, so we're gonna look deeper in. Whereas, like you said, England's a lot more of a classist society, so I don't think
Hmm.
so that might definitely affect the way like you would perceive yourself. And the
Yeah.
Latin American community can perceive itself well. If there's a bit more stability economically, there might not need to be much of a reason to look for at the identity path. There might be more of an incentive to just look towards assimilation. But that's only a hypothesis, if I'm being
Mm.
honest. There are probably studies of this, not many, but I'm sure there are studies. And no, I just love this conversation. It's just I just I just really like to see how like narratives kind of open up when you have like actually unique stories being told. I kind of do get bored when the same stories are told. It no matter how cynical that does sound, I do like hearing this unique perspective. And I never thought there would be uh, a coherent and actually a pretty stable Latin American community outside of Spain in Europe. Though I have heard there are Peruvians in France, in Paris.
Yeah. Yes,
There,
there's a lot
there's
of Peruvians.
there's a
I
big
mean,
Peruvian diaspora there.
yeah, I mean, the most stable Peruvian communities are in Italy, actually.
Really?
Yes.
I think there are a lot of Bolivians there too. I know actually, real quick, there are a lot of Bolivians, I believe, in Sweden or in like or I have family members in Sweden who escaped Bolivia during one of the dictatorships, the Luis Mesa or Garcia Mesa dictatorship. He was part of a socialist party. He was given the decision between being exiled in Sweden or being exiled in Spain, and he chose Sweden because um, this was 5 years after Franco. Um, so he chose Sweden, social democracy, and he's lived there. And there are Bolivians there as well. But I heard there are Bolivians in Italy as well, a considerable amount.
Yeah.
Um, but
I think
I
I
wonder why.
Well, because I don't know when they start. I think they started to go to Italy in the 80s, but I don't know how like the process was back then. But what I gathered from a friend who actually acquired Italian citizenship in 2011, that it's actually quite a fairly straightforward process, like Spain. So I don't know
Unlike
if
here.
I don't know if they had an agreement with these countries. I know Spain did, obviously, for obviously obvious reasons, but I'm not sure about Italy. But I figure that once you've got your citizenship and it only took 5 years, then life becomes a lot easier. Yes, there's always trials and tribulations. For example, London is a very expensive city, so there's always going to be like economic problems, but that goes for everybody, not just Latin Americans. So you know, but I do feel that when you've come to the UK, you more or less got your nationality in tow. If not, obviously it's a different ball game. But I'm not sure what the percentages of illegals and Latin Americans. We only hear about legal Latin Americans. Like that's what I'm hearing. And
Hmm.
there's a fair amount of them. That's what I can say.
Yeah, because there definitely is a lot more emphasis as well on quote illegal immigration or like refugees from Africa, from the
Hmm.
Middle East as well, especially North Africa. I'm not sure how it is. I don't know which country specifically. I wonder if there was like a large Libyan immigration. I'm sure there's also a large Syrian immigration to Europe, but I'm not sure about England. But still, there definitely doesn't seem to be an emphasis on the quote unquote illegal or undocumented immigration from Latin America to the waves of Latin American immigration to London. I'm sure that's not on the headlines in BBC.
I hear that if the illegal the illegal, I shouldn't say this like that, but a lot of the illegal Latin Americans coming to England, they go through Ireland because they don't need a visa to go to Ireland, and then you can cross the channel.
Oh, that going through the EU status countries. That makes sense. That's the thing about immigration. People are creative. They'll find a way.
Mhm.
I mean,
And
there's
yeah, anyway, but I think, I mean, like I say, not all the time. I'm not really in the Latin American community, so I can't really say like, okay, I don't know the actual like goings in and on, but I do have Latin Americans who have come to England and they have told me their stories, um and that's what I get.
It's really impressive, stories that you guys, have shared. I learned a lot.
yeah. Yo, Marcus Juanchalo, we gotta go to England now.
Right?
Yeah,
I got to get to
that would be.
London.
Yeah, we gotta go see. We gotta go check out the. I know if there's a big Colombian community. I want to try out the. I want to see how the empanadas stack up from here in the U.S. and then over there.
I
Hell yeah.
think you guys would win hands down. I mean, I can't compare any kind of food here, like, but I feel like you guys have got more. I like my first, how do you call the Mexican things?
Tacos.
Chips. Yeah, yeah. Like
Oh
my
my god,
first
it's
taco was in the States in Chicago because I never had a proper taco in my life until about 4 years ago.
Never had a what? Sorry, cut
A,
off.
ta- a taco.
Oh, a taco.
Yeah,
it's so strange that tacos are like unknown in England. That's that's such a culture shock, honestly.
that's what I mean. Like you've got everyday food at your disposal. Like it's not everyday food unless you live in these small communities. You just don't get them. I can't just go to the restaurant and just get a taco or empanada. I'd have to go to these restaurants
That's
or
so that
whatever.
that would be the biggest culture shock for me. Though I'm always the academic and love to talk about books in high and like quote high culture, I would miss the good food that's around here. Oh my god. Uh, I could never go my life without an
And
empanada.
we don't have tamales, as they say. I guess you get tamales
My
wherever you
god.
want.
That's
I
street
don't know.
food.
What is a tamala? I mean,
Tamale
I guess
is
I know what a tamala, but I don't know. Is
it
it like the screen thing?
Juanchelo, you want to go on this one?
Oh, what was the question? Sorry, I was looking at the chat.
What's a tamale?
What's
To explain what a tamale is.
Oh, shit, that's a hard one. It's hard to explain, dude. I don't know.
I feel you on that, bro, because I'm having a hard time thinking of how to explain it myself.
They can
Yo,
be
it's
made
like
of like various things that like pork, right? And I think one's like cheese. But I don't know. It's hard to explain it. I haven't ever.
Usually it's like corn. It's like corn flour. What is it?
Oh
Corn
yeah,
flour that's made into a dough, and then you wrap
yeah.
up
Leaf.
chicken in it. Yeah,
Oh,
and then you can put in chicken. You can put in different types of meats, and then you just wrap it up in banana leaves, and then
that's
steam it.
it. Yeah. Okay, so I probably had only them in Peru, and we definitely have never had them in England, and I don't
Yeah,
really know. Like, I don't
they
know.
they call them humintas in Peru, I believe, and in Bolivia too, or is it just Bolivia? They might call them
there's
tamales in Peru. In Bolivia, they call them humintas, the type of corn dough with it's just it's very similar to a Mexican tamale, but yeah, no, that would be the greatest culture shock. I would love to. I know there are. I've talked to a couple of English or English-born Latin Americans. One was Colombian, so I can see where where that comes from now. Um, there was a time where I thought I would go to England to on a scholarship to do research that I would apply for it.
Oh,
Now I'm reconsidering it, but that would be quite the lifestyle change for a year or two. But now I'm like very fascinated and very much wanting to see and interact with this community. Oh, that's so interesting.
Now you
But I'm
guys are
sure
getting me
it would,
hungry.
yeah, I'm sure it would be a culture shock for many UK Latin Americans to come here, honestly.
Well, it was for me. I just couldn't believe it when I arrived in the United States the first time. I was like, oh my gosh, this is really strange that people know where I'm from and there's people speaking Spanish to me and people seeing me in a very different way. It was just too bizarre. Like people were noticing me more hit in the United States than they are in the UK.
Like, but people treated you in terms of
Just
people.
all people were noticing me more. Like they were pinpointing me that I'm Latin American and
Uh,
that I have apparently all this stuff with me, and I'm like, no, I don't.
they saw your the humanity that wasn't seen in London. That must be quite. It must have been quite ingratiating and honestly, very affirming.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird at first because I wasn't used to so much people sort of just looking at me and sort of recognizing me, and I'm like, wait, I don't know you. But then I realized that affinity that I've never had here in the UK, and it was strange but nice. But I had gone to Peru before I'd gone to United States, so I was beginning to get more accustomed with the affinity kind of part, realizing that you look like that person and they look like you. Okay, because obviously I grew up with my white family and I have lots of friends who are not Andean. So I never saw myself in anybody, nobody. So when I went to Peru, I suddenly saw myself in so many people. Like, oh my God, we got the same face, or we got the same color eyes, or we got the same hair, or we got the same height, or we're actually from the Andes. Like this whole thing for me was so unique at the age of 18 that I actually saw myself in somebody because I hadn't seen myself in any, I hadn't seen what an older version of myself was like ever. So I didn't know really what to think of. And as I was going through childhood, I didn't know what I was going to be like because I had no image of who my mum was or my sisters were. So it was totally bizarre to me to see somebody older and looking at me. So anyway, so it was just an interesting process for me. So, but in the United States, it was a different type of like connection.
No, I think there needs to be more of these discussions. I see there are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of key differences that I think would shock a lot more people than just us, and I just love that honestly. But thank you so much for sharing your stories, Millie. This was an amazing convo.
Oh, it's okay.
But yeah, no, I definitely like to talk about this more. And I honestly know, I've had friends who have gone to London, on vacation, of course, or spring break. So I'm definitely gonna try to make a trip out there and try to explore the entire, like, try to explore everything. Not just go to the London Eye, but now I gotta go to which borough was it? Like
Elephant
Dwarfs
and
and Elephants,
Castle, Elephant and Castle, and Seven
Elephant and
Sisters.
Castle. Yeah, now I gotta go visit Elephant and Castle, and I know there is a store. I think the Latin Market that I have to visit
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. There's lots of things you have to visit if you come to London. Any of you guys come to London, I can show you around. I can take you to, there's a proven restaurant in Elephant and Castle that I go to. And it's pretty good. I'm not saying it's the best. Okay, I don't want to put your high hopes, but it's bog standard for me and it's like super friendly and like cost effective, as I say. Because sometimes Peruvian food is really expensive here. Like they put the food prices up a lot. It's
Oh,
like
of course, export costs.
not that, it's just that some posh restaurants have taken on Peruvian
Uh,
food. It's nothing to do with costs, it's to do with the like because Peru is pictured as a medium high kind of destination, and so you can get the kind of cuisine that you would have eaten in the Machu Picchu like restaurant or Lima restaurant, Miraflores, transported to England to London. So you have that going on as well.
oh, okay, that makes
Yeah, so
that's
it's a
kind of
whole
strange because
yeah,
it's a different experience here of
exactly.
Latin American food might be
Exactly.
seen as more lower class. It's seen as more
No,
a lot more
we,
cheap and affordable.
no, we don't have that. We don't have street food of Latin American really like we do have Asian, or American. So our Latin American cuisine is in restaurants, there's a really fancy. There's a few fancy restaurants, Peruvian. I say fancy. They're not fancy, fancy, but they're like kind of fancy.
Yeah.
But they're expensive. You know, you could spend $80 eating a little piece of I don't know what of like Andean potatoes and I don't know what chicken, corn-fed chicken, for example. You know, Peruvian style, like a la brasa.
Sin. That's sinful. I could never.
Anyway,
$80 on pollo a la brasa? No way.
no, but it's not pollo a la brasa. It's corn-fed chicken with some Andean potatoes with exquisite maize and asparagus from Peru. Anyway, you know what I mean.
Marcus.
They're trying to like mark it up.
Yeah.
So I went to one of those restaurants. I said, "Oh, let me," because the interior was really nice. I went to it and I looked at the plate and I was like to my friend, "Listen, this doesn't represent Peru. It's just that I wanted to see where it was at, the food in London. So I'm having this experience, but this is not Peru. And this is very much French kind of inspired, European kind of inspired, like portion size and the layout and everything." I said, this is not Peru.
Oh,
But anyway, so we have
that's
these
its own
sorts of
thing.
restaurants, yeah. And
Yeah.
then we have like my like cheapo kind of restaurant in Elephant and Castle. And it's still not cheap, but it's cheap for England London prices.
I would
Okay, so
definitely try. I would definitely try everything outside besides the curry and the fish and chips that I would be eating every day. I would love to have some Latin American food there.
yeah.
Uh, but Marcus, Chuanchalo, could you imagine putting asparagus next to like tamales or like or you finding like sun-dried tomatoes like in our potatoes? Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh. We got to fight some people in in
Yeah.
London now. It's on site.
God, some
But-
asparagus.
Oh man, asparagus tacos.
Asparagus.
Yeah,
I would
but,
like to
Yeah.
try the fish and chips there one day.
I heard there.
Oh
Like,
yeah. But what we do good in cuisine is fish and chips, English roast dinner, and lots of Asian food like curry and food from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. I would say that's where we like rule the roost. But everything else, forget it. I think you guys have tasted better.
No, but what's done best in London is done best in London, and it has to be tried. And it actually does look appetizing. I would love to. I've always wanted a good English breakfast as well.
Oh yeah, that's true. And our cakes, like English tea.
Ooh,
So
that sounds
English tea, nice scones, and
I-
English cakes.
I would love an old school English pie.
Oh yeah, fish pie, like meat
Not
pie.
fish pie. I've heard of eel pie, but
Oh,
not that old. But I would love an English. Wait, please don't tell me that's the the star cuisine of the pie field in England.
I don't know what the no. I think it would be steak and kidney pie would be probably one of the.
I would be very much willing to try a lot of savory pies there. It sounds
Yeah.
very good. Though I wonder what would be less appetizing to someone who to someone who has no idea of cuisine. Would blood pudding or like guinea pig seem more unappetizing? Because I know both of those are seen as like taboo food.
Probably
Or-
guinea pig.
I think guinea pig, yeah. But Marcus, would you go in on a guinea pig or would you go on in on a blood sausage?
Oh
Haggis.
man, that's tough.
Yeah.
Well, I've had sausage before, but I've never. I don't think I've heard it called a blood sausage.
I tried a blood sausage one time and I hated it. It was disgusting.
Did it taste of iron?
It tasted like almost like crayon. It was, I don't know. It was gross. I didn't like it. It had like
that's nasty.
it had like a clay like consistency. I was like, ugh. I don't
That's
like it.
quite the description, man.
It was
Damn.
like bitter. It was like bitter.
I would, but I'm very much an enthusiast for trying new foods. I'm not a foodie, but I would love to go in and like try London's cuisine, and I would love to go to like Scotland as well and Wales. I've heard one of the most similar environments to the highlands in Bolivia and Peru is the highlands in Scotland. So definitely. But I know I know it's probably late over there in England. You probably have to go. So
Yeah, thanks a lot, Millie, for coming on.
Guys, And Niramat, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, no worry. New Amauta. Amauta.
Niramat, it's so good to speak with you, and I'd love to chat with you more. Maybe Marcus will give you my details, vice versa.
Of course.
And yeah, I'd love to continue this conversation further. Marcus, as always, it's been a pleasure. Buen cholo,
Thank you.
adios, and
Adios.
Kazip, adios.
Ciao. Adios.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Wait, she forgot to say goodbye to Claude.
Damn, she was insulted
No.
by your blood pudding comment. It was. I guess we should end it off here then, and then have the after party.
Probably. Yeah, we'll end it up here because some of us might got stuff going on tomorrow. So we'll throw the after party link. Y'all can jump on the ship if you want. But I think we're going to close it up here. So unless you guys had anything to add, we will
No,
end
I was
this
just
live.
not expecting the English Latin American migration stories, but I'm super intrigued now, and I want to go to London. I've had friends who have enjoyed, my girlfriend as well has enjoyed London, so I like, what was it? I could always make it a trip there. But if that doesn't happen, you guys want to also like fly out and meet the Queen and all, we can definitely go for it.
I'd be down.
Yeah, I'd be down, man.
Definitely. Yeah. We'll talk more about that then.
Just native boys in London.
Oh, yeah.
We colonizing London. We doing it in
Yo.
reverse.
Going to London first.
Blue energy, I fuck with it.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, guys, again, thanks for being on the live. We'll move to the after party. Juan Chiloa, got anything?
Yeah, for the haters, I wish you nothing but misfortune every step of the way.
Dang.
I love
sure
my
Mark-
haters. I love my haters.
You love your haters? I know there was a Hispanista on here earlier. Like, took him out.
I
You
love
should be
it.
like if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, because it's still traffic.
Yeah, it's still
Yeah,
traffic,
that's what
guys.
helps us. Yeah, I mean, even when they drop the negative comments, like there's some guy that was insulting us on our last video, right? He's calling us dumb and all this shit. It was like fucking 60 comments deep, and I told him on there, I was like, you're helping us with the algorithm, so thank you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, really. But yeah, again, everyone in the comments, thank you all for still watching. We got like 19, 20 people that were watching, man. It's pretty great. Shout out to Gabby, Destiny, Wanderer, Jesse, Diego, thank you for coming on. Thomas, Ika, everybody else, thank you so much. We are going to end and start our after party now. So we'll see y'all later.
See ya.
See ya.
Peace.